impacting over 20,000 learners, helping to increase our lifelong learning metrics as a nation, being recognised both nationally and internationally, and I think it's probably not been said enough this morning, that whole international recognition and the amount of times that we have had people approach us in the HCI to approach MicroCreds, the number of international conferences that they've spoken at. So it's really important for us to recognise that it is, you know, in Europe it's seen as a really fantastic project, and we're seen as kind of trailblazers in that area. So it really deserves that recognition. And I think it has also impacted on a number of our national strategic priorities and a number of our national strategies, like Housing for All. We've talked about modern methods of construction, which is extremely difficult to say, I might add. We've talked about a lot of micro-credentials in the sustainability, climate change area. And so it's climate action, it's Housing for All, it's a lot of the strategies that we're looking at. And I think that whole link in with the employer and enterprise has been such a great outcome of the programme. And it's kind of developed deep and sustainable relationships with enterprise that are going to go on and on and on, and that have reached into not only just micro-credentials, but probably other areas of the universities where they have been developed. I think, you know, for us in the HCI, there is another objective that isn't written down anywhere, and that is to be able to work with fantastic people, and people that we can trust, and people that we know are going to do a really good job. And I think we kind of hit gold here with that. I wanted to say thank you to Lynn, who was there at the very start, to Jules, to David, to Emma, to all of the micro-credential project managers right across the sector, and to everybody else who was involved in employer groupings, who was involved in the communications aspect of it, and so on. But, you know, what happens next, I suppose, is the big question. And we want to see this work continue to progress. We want to see the innovation and the agility continue. And I know that it's a government priority to continue to develop micro-credentials and to continue to invest in that area. We're happy to say that in the Higher Education Authority we're going to take on the MicroCreds portal. We hope to expand that to continue to work with all of the universities and other higher education institutions to expand that portal. It is, although it has been 5 years, I suppose, for the HCI, it is still relatively new when you think about how, you know, how much has been done. But a lot of these kind of new innovations and new developments take time to bed in. And we talked a lot about communication on the panel there. We talked a lot about how we can get that message out to employers, to learners, and so on. We ourselves in the HCI do a lot of work around surveying learners in terms of what's important to them in terms of lifelong learning and skills development, and that time aspect and that work-life balance, but also the cost. And the cost is hugely important for a lot of people, particularly if you're a learner who's taking on a micro-credential just, you know, to upskill or reskill or better themselves. And so we have been actively working with the department over the last couple of weeks to ensure that we can continue with that, with the incentive, the micro-credentials, and we're hoping that we can have some news on that later on in the spring. And I don't know if it'll be as much as we had previously, but it'll certainly be something that will help. We've actively also been talking to them in terms of the estimates for 2027, and we're hoping that we can secure even more money when it comes to a package, I think, for skills across the tertiary sector. And I guess also within the HCI, it's important to note that we are working on a kind of a review of our funding model. I think it's really important that we now start to recognise shorter programmes, the different ways of learning, that blended learning, that online, that's becoming so important for the learner, and we're looking at that currently, so that will be of benefit as well. But we're also looking at reviewing our own student record system so that we're able to capture that vital information around micro-credentials, but also around enterprise engagement, around work placements, and that kind of information that helps us in the HCI to have that evidence base, because It's a tricky space, lifelong learning, to have evidence around. Particularly, I think, the impact, because you could do a micro-credential, or you could do a springboard course, or you could do a micro-qualification. And, you know, for you it has been a huge benefit in how you work, but it doesn't necessarily look like anything if you go to the CSO and link it into work data, labour market data. So it's difficult sometimes for us to be able to explain the impact of lifelong learning. And one of the only ways that we can do that is by kind of gathering these testimonials, having people explain themselves in their own words what this has actually done for them and how it has helped them. So I encourage you to continue to gather those testimonials, to continue to gather that kind of information, because, as I said, it's really important in terms of how we explain why we need increased investment. But I hope we can work with all of the universities in the same way that David, Jules and the team have been working over the last 5 years. We'll do our very best. We will have a bit of a learning experience and a bit of bedding in, so if anybody's developed a micro-credential and how to take over micro-credentials, could they please tell us? I wish the team all the best, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the day. So thank you very much.